And we might be live. Let me give it a minute until I see the little number. And we are live. Welcome, guys. Let me see the chat. So we've got 5 minutes to go. 5 minutes exactly. Let us know where you're tuning from. We still have 5 minutes to get to know each other. I'm good, Janie, I'm good. Let me show you where I am. It was hot, but not so much anymore. Now it's, well, I just put my jumper back on. Hi, Gwen, welcome. So we've got 5 minutes to go. If any of you were watching this on replay later on, if you wanted to skip the hellos and go straight to the point, you could skip the next 4 minutes. Those guys are in a good mood, singing on the bicycle. Hi Wanda, yeah, I'm doing well. Has it been cooler in York? Yeah, today, well, in the morning, early morning, it was a little bit cooler than it has been, because I often do those jobs starting at 8. So, yeah, it was a little bit fresher, but it's still a good weather. So we've got 4 minutes before it's officially time to start. Oh, thank you, Tish. And Pauline is here. Welcome, Pauline. Behind me, by the way, let me flip this camera around and show you. I don't think I ever showed you that building in my tours. This is the Adelaide building. It's one of the oldest skyscrapers. Well, it's considered as one of the oldest office block and skyscrapers. 1925. It's a Art Deco building, and guess what? They had on top. They have a roof terrace, and on top they had a golf course. Well, not really a golf course. How do you call them? A putting hole. Putting course, not putting hole, that sounds a bit dirty. So they had a putting course on top. Hi Nikki, welcome. So we've got 2 minutes to go. Keep letting us know where you're tuning from. We still have 2 minutes to go. Yeah, I had not heard of putting courses before. Hi Katie, welcome. Atlanta, nice. So I'm just here at the base of the London Bridge, north side. Let me show you the building in the distance there, the skyscraper right in the middle of your screen. You might be able to see it's a little bit triangular. We have a lot of skyscrapers in London that have interesting names. We have the Scalpel, the Walkie Talkie, the Gherkin, the Egg, the Cheese Grater. So the developers, when they built that one, they thought it'll be a good idea to give it a funny name. That way they would not get a ridiculous nickname, right? So they tried to call it the Boomerang, because it's a bit triangular, but that did not work. Most people call it the Pregnant Lady. Hi Michelle, nice to see you here. So we've got 1 minute to go, 1 minute before it's officially time to start. Hi Geneviève, welcome.
Next Monday.
And let me get down from my boulard or whatever they're called. It's the stuff to avoid, to avoid terrorism really. Because we had some terrible attacks here in 2017. And it is officially time to go. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the London Bridge. Just a bit of housekeeping as usual before we start. So you've got the chat. Feel free to use it. Ask me any questions you might have. If I've missed any of your questions, don't be shy. You can try again because sometimes the chat might go a bit too quick for me. And you also have, it should be pinned at the top of the chat, you have a link to give me a little donation. At the moment, that's the only money I get for those live tours. I'm not monetized on YouTube quite yet, so any donation is very much appreciated. And for the ones that don't know me, I'm Nathalie. Right, let's go. So I'm at the moment on the London Bridge, not to be confused with the Tower Bridge. The Tower Bridge, oh thank you Janie. The Tower Bridge is the one down there, so that's the famous one that opens. It's much newer. The Tower Bridge is actually Victorian. At the time, they wanted a bridge that would open because London is a port city. So they wanted a bridge that would open for the boats to go and unload their cargo on the other side down there. So they had a little competition with many architects taking part, and the gentleman that won with the best design, his name is Sir Horace Jones, and he came up with that idea. Well, I say won, he was also part of the jury, so that helped. And as you can see, it's a famous Instagram spot. But yeah, so that's for the Tower Bridge. At the moment, we are on the London Bridge. The London Bridge is very famous because it's full of history, because for about 18 centuries really, the London Bridge was the only bridge in London. What happened is we used to have those ferrymen that made a fortune by transporting people from one side of the river to the next. And they were making so much money that they were lobbying Parliament to stop the construction of new bridges. And that worked until the mid-1700s, really. The London Bridge, you might know it for the little nursery rhyme. You know, London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady. We do not know exactly where the lyrics are coming from. We do not even know how old exactly the nursery rhyme is. There are many different theories on how we ended up with those lyrics. My favorite theory is that it might be because of Eleanor de Provence. She was a French lady that married the king, Henry III, and she was known to be spending a lot of the tax money into her own leisure. She was the queen, the queen consort, like Camilla today. And at the time there was a tax to cross the London Bridge. So some historians have speculated that it could have been people singing to the queen consort, London Bridge is falling down, meaning stop spending the money on yourself, and in which case the fair lady would be the queen. That's the only thing you could play on recorder. Cool. And so that's, according to me, it's the theory that's the most believable, I would say. But there's another theory that's a little bit more sinister. We had a medieval practice called immurement. Mur is French for wall. So immurement, it is to put something or somebody into a wall or into the foundations of a building. They did that quite a lot in medieval time because they somehow believed that the spirit of the animal, because they used to put, sadly, very often dead cats into the walls, they believed that the spirit of that dead cat would protect the building against the misfortune. And in Germany they found a bridge with the remains of a boy in the foundation of the bridge. So some historians have speculated that there might have been the remains of a lady in the foundations of the old London Bridge. It is a bit far-fetched, but it is possible. If you looked at the lyrics, they have changed over the years, but at some point it said, "Take the keys and lock her up, lock her up, lock her up, take the keys and lock her up, my fair lady." Why would they say that? So, you know, who knows, who knows. And the London Bridge in medieval time, it was famous because there were some buildings on top. Let me show you an image of the old London Bridge. So that's the medieval one. And on the very south side, you had some spikes. The spikes were there to place the heads of the traitors that were beheaded down there around the Tower of London. And those heads would stay there for months, sometimes years. So that was to remind everyone that, you know, even if they were poor, even if they were, you know, they still had something to lose, their heads. And would you believe it was a job to be the keeper of the heads? That was somebody's job, to boil them, sometimes put a bit of tar or a bit of salt to preserve them a bit longer. Then he'll place them on the spike, and it was also his job to dispose of them when they were a bit too you want the job. Well, I'm not sure it was much money, but yeah. Whenever they were really too disgusting and too rotten, he would dispose of them. They used to just dump them in the river. Actually, when they they destroyed the old London Bridge, they did find a few skulls there. Or sometimes he would take a little bride for people to literally buy the head. Mainly the families, or it could have been collectors as well. You know, some people might have been collecting the heads of traitors. You know, why not? You want a French nursery rhyme? Yeah, I guess Frère Jacques is probably. I don't think I know any more than Frère Jacques actually, but yeah. And so if you see straight away in the middle of the screen now, you might see a big spike. It is art, it is modern art. Most Londoners don't know what it's doing there, but it's actually to remind us of those spikes that were here back in the days. So yeah, it is art with a dark little spin on it. I don't even know if I remember Frère Jacques. How does it go? Frère Jacques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous. Sonnez, is it the same one? Yeah. Sonnez les matines, ding dang dong. That's all I remember. If you know anymore, let us know. And hi Kurt. So now that we've crossed the bridge, we are now in Southwark. So today Southwark is very much part of London. But dormez-vous, Katie, dormez-vous. Are you sleeping? Back in the days, Southwark was a different jurisdiction. So if you crossed over the bridge, technically you were no longer in the city of London. And it is here on this side that we had all the theatres, all the brothels, the cockpit, all the fun really. So that's where you'd come for the fun. And if you wanted to go back to the city of London, often, back in the days at night, the London Bridge was closed, so you'd have to take a ferryman anyway, or to stay on the fun side until the next morning. And let me show you how we know that we are outside of the City of London. Again, when I say the City of London, I mean the city with a capital C. We've got 32 boroughs in London, 32 districts. The city is only one of them. So when you see the dragon, if you face the dragon, you are entering the city. And if you see the bum of the dragon, you are exiting the City of London. So we are exiting the city because we're gonna go down here, down the Nancy steps. And I'm gonna be quiet in the steps because I know sometimes there's a tiny little bit of a signal dip, so I don't want you to miss anything. And there we go, it should be much better here already. So I've just very casually called them the Nancy steps. Let me show you why. I'll show you a blue plaque that is actually very wrong. You shouldn't take for granted everything you see on the plaques in London. So according to this plaque, it is here that Nancy was killed, murdered in the novel Oliver Twist. That's not quite true. That's where she was murdered in the movie Oliver from the 1960s. So it was already called the Nancy Steps because in the novel it is here that she has a meeting with Mr. Brenslow and she's being spied on by Noah Claypole but then eventually she is being murdered, not here though. She's being murdered at home in her bed by Bill Syke. So quite similar to the Eliza Grimwood murder that you might have heard of in my Dark Tales of Waterloo. Kurt says it's not an official plaque. Southwark Council City Bridge Trust denied all knowledge of this origin. Well, if it's not official, they could remove it, Kurt. If they decide to leave it, that they agree, isn't it? How do you know that? Did you used to work for London Heritage or something, Kurt? And while we're here, let me show you. There's a moth here. They've just invaded London. So it's a series of amazing sculptures of the cartoon character. He's very British moth. I didn't really grow up watching him, but they are all over the touristic part of London at the moment, and they're going to be supporting a charity that helps young adults and kids in a wheelchair. And I believe there's an auction on 12th of September. So if you did want to buy yourself a moth, you could join the auction. Anyway, this is Southwark Cathedral. It is a lovely cathedral, and it comes with a little legend behind it. It is the legend of St. Mary Overy's. St. Mary, she was the daughter of a chap called John. He was a ferryman. So he made a fortune by transporting people to the other side of the river. He had a lot of people working for him. And it is said, it's a bit of a legend, we don't know if there's any truth behind it, but it is said that one day, John had an idea. He decided to make people believe he was dead. He believed that his staff, all his employees would mourn him, so then they'll eat less. So then indirectly he would save money. Why not? So one night, John put himself into his bed, pretending to be dead. And well, actually he was not as popular as he imagined. And his employee, instead of mourning him, they had a party. And apparently from upstairs, John could hear the party. He was furious. So he ran down, he grabbed an oar, and he was gonna scream at his employees when one of his employees was there on the staircase, and they believed it was a ghost because they believed the man to be dead, right? So the employee grabbed the oar and smashed it on John's head. Then he died for real. And apparently his daughter Mary, she was of course ever so sad, so she sent a letter to her lover to tell him to come because daddy was dead, he was gonna come and collect the inheritance, and finally they could marry. So the boyfriend apparently jumped on his horse and came down to London way too fast. He had a horse accident and he died as well. So they say that Mary, after losing two of the men in her life for monastery, she would have decided to put all her dad's savings into the creation of a priory here, the Priory of St. Mary Overy's. We don't know if there's any truth behind it, but it's a nice little legend. And it is a free cathedral to visit. We have some cathedrals in London that you have to pay to get in, like St. Paul's or Westminster Abbey. This one is free. Well, both St. Paul's and Westminster Abbey you can actually get in for free if you pretend to go to the service. But at Westminster Abbey they're very well used to it, so they force you to stay. So you have to stay until the end. Anyway, we're now heading towards the Borough Market. So the Borough Market is a very old market. It dates back to, well, we don't know how old exactly. Officially, I think it's 1276, but we think it's at least the 1040s and probably even older. This spot was always a very busy spot in terms of traffic because the London Bridge was the only bridge in London. So anyone going south would cross that bridge. You'd have all the pilgrims going towards Canterbury. You had everyone going towards Dover on France. So it was always a good place to do business. And actually the merchants of the City of London were jealous. Many times they tried to forbid the Borough Market. At some point it was illegal to come down to Southwark to do your shopping, but that never really worked. I mean, they managed to close it a couple of times, but it always came back. And on a sad note, some of you might remember the terrorist attacks of June 2017. It is also here in the Borough Market that the attacker was running around with a knife and stabbing people. And you'll see suddenly the atmosphere is gonna get a little bit darker. It has been the set filming location for quite a few movies, the Borough Market, because of this lovely atmosphere. And it was also the site of a murder, well, manslaughter really. We had in the 1980s two traders that worked here at the market. They had a few too many drinks at the pub straight ahead. One was called or nicknamed Flash Alf, we don't know why, and the other one was Edward Lamb. And they had a quarrel after a few drinks at lunchtime, and one of them grabbed his umbrella and he basically stabbed the other one in the eye. So he was killed by an umbrella. And they met at the pub straight ahead. Oh, you remember, Janie? Yeah, I think, well, pretty much every Londoner will remember that day. Yep, killed by an umbrella. We have another umbrella murder on Waterloo Bridge, but a very different story. Brolyside, yes, exactly. And we are now at a very famous filming location. If you come here at daytime, every day you have at least, or let's say at least 15 Harry Potter tours coming through here. Because there's one scene in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets where they come here with the Magicobus and they arrive right here. Then Harry goes up into the leaky cauldron. So they stop right here. Then Harry goes up to the room at the corner up there, left corner, and he looks through the window. So the inside of the building, it's filmed in the studio, but then he looks through the window and you have a view of the train and the Borough Market in the movies. It's a very quick, a few second clip, but yeah, we've got a lot of Harry Potter fans that love coming here. It's not the only entrance of the Leaky Cauldron, because they had changed the director of Harry Potter after the second one, and they changed the entrance to the Leaky Cauldron. Right, let me show you another view here that's quite cool with the Shard in the background. And this part of the market here looks a little bit different because it's not from here, it's actually from Covent Garden. I think it's Edward Barry, the architect. They sold it for one symbolic pound because they didn't know what to do with it. So that's how it ended up here. Anyway, time to tell you about, it was where they were filmed, what were filmed. Yeah, a bargain, exactly, Janie. Time to tell you about our murderer of tonight. It's a chap called Severin Klosowski. Severin was actually born in Poland, and he trained as a Fletcher, that is some kind of a surgeon barber in the army. So he would do some minor surgery and assist the surgeon. And barber, well, it was often going together, barber surgeon, even here in the UK. That's why, you know, the barber sign, it is, you still have them today, you know, those little signs with the white and the red. Apparently it's because in front of the barber shops, because they used to be pulling teeth and doing minor surgery, they used to have those pieces of fabric drying, you know, towels and stuff that were full of blood and bandages after being washed. So that's how the sign originated. Apparently they added the blue later on to differentiate the barbers and the surgeon. Don't worry for being late, Angie. You've not missed much. So yeah, he trained as some kind of a barber surgeon in Poland, and we do not know why he's left his country of Poland to come here to London. Did he maybe escape because he had done some kind of crime? Who knows? Or maybe illegal abortion? Or we just don't know. What we do know is that as soon as he moved to London, he moved to Whitechapel in 1888. Wow, that might ring a bell. It could have been late 1887, we're not too sure. But a few weeks later, a wife and 2 kids followed him. She claimed to be his wife, and well, she was never seen again. She disappeared. She could have gone back to Poland, but there's no evidence of any of that. Now, you'd have to know that the crimes of Jack the Ripper in 1888 were not the only crimes in London at the time. We also had the torso murders. Those were body parts found all over London, mainly in the Thames River. And one of the torso murder was very close to Cable Street. That's where he moved. So some ripologists actually believed that not only is he responsible for the Ripper murders, but he could also be responsible for the torso murders. And Jay, I'm not too sure my backyard. I don't really have. Oh yeah, I do have a backyard, but it's a car park that I share with 50 of my flatmates, if that's what you're asking for. And so yeah, his wife disappeared. So some people believe that he actually killed his wife. Then he met another lady, Lucy, and they married. Technically, he's already married in Poland, but they probably didn't know that. So he married Lucy. And by the way, I know he's from Poland, so sometimes people assume that he was Jewish. He was actually a Roman Catholic. So he clearly cannot marry twice, but he married Lucy. And he had a barber shop in a pub in Whitechapel for a while, exactly next to where Martha Tabram was found, although he had the shop about a year later. And then they moved to New Jersey, him and Lucy. While we're here, this beautiful building, you can see it used to be a warehouse, because you still have a bit of a crane here to lift up the goods, you know, all the deliveries. So they moved to New Jersey about the same time as the Ripper murders have stopped here. And actually, they were in Jersey City. In Manhattan, at that point, there's a murder. Her name was Carrie Brown. She was a sex worker, and she was found in a hotel room. It was a butchery, very similar to Mary Jane Kelly's murder. So, you know, it could be a coincidence, but yeah. And he opens a barber shop in Jersey City. We have some reason to believe he might also have been doing some illegal abortions at that time, because he had a bit more income than would be expected. And he was being very violent with Lucy. They had had a child that died. At the time, nobody saw anything suspicious with that death. Then Lucy got pregnant again, and apparently one day she's pregnant in the shop when he's being extremely violent to her, and a customer walked in. So he had to stop and behave. Apparently, the minute the customer walked out, he told Lucy that if that customer had not walked in, he would have severed her head and hid her body. Now, Lucy, she is smart enough to run back to London. Well, maybe not run, she jumped on a boat, but she left him, and a couple of weeks later, he actually followed her. Then they didn't get back together, so it's not quite clear whether he got back to New Jersey for a few months or not after that. At that point, we are in 1892. There was also a case well, it started by St. Paul's Cathedral and it finished in Whitechapel. A lady that claimed that she was attacked by a man, and he claimed that he was Jack the Ripper. She managed to escape. She kicked him in the balls and she managed to escape, or that's what she claimed. It was quite clear at the time that the police did not believe her. Her name was Emily Smith. The journalist didn't really believe her either. I'm not telling you she was telling the truth, but if she was, well, the description she gave of the man was quite uncanny with Chapman. She said that he was some Eastern European origin, maybe Russian. He had an accent, he had very high cheekbones and funny eyebrows, like if they were almost going back towards his eye. So, you know, maybe. Anyway, yeah, let's a little pause in the story to tell you about those amazing swans. So they've been commissioned. You know, with street art, sometimes it's hard to tell if it's done illegally in the middle of the night or if it is commissioned. This is commissioned by TfL. TfL is Transport for London. They are above my head. And well, I mean, the train is above my head, not TfL head office. And if you looked a bit closer, Jimmy C is actually spent a lot of time in Australia, and he studied Aborigine art. So the pointillism that the Aborigine population used to do is, or still do actually, is copied that style, but he adapted it with a spray. So it's probably very painful. I don't know if you ever held a spray, but it's very painful for your fingers after a while. So amazing piece of art. Jimmy C, he often gets tagged. Often some of the calligraphy artists are a bit jealous that he gets commissioned and they damage his work. He frightens you, the creepy man. Well, I can see why, Janie. Anyway, before to get back to Klosowski, let me tell you a bit more about what's to my left. It is the Crossbone graveyard. In 1107, the Bishop of Winchester over here, he was the younger brother of the king. At the time when the king had some sons, the first one was going to be the king, the second one was going to go into the church, you know, like a bishop. If there was a third one, they'll go into the army. The Bishop of Winchester, he legalized prostitution over here in Southwark. And it was called the Liberty of the Clink. And not only did he legalize it, but he took a commission out of it. So he basically took a cut out of the sex workers selling their bodies and out of the brothels. So that's a little bit unusual for a bishop. So he took a cut, but they did not give them the permission to be buried on consecrated ground. So this little, we don't know whether the graveyard was already there in the 12th century. We've got evidence of it being as old as the 1500s, but it could be much older. So it's a little piece of land where those ladies were buried unconsecrated. It has been finally consecrated in 2015, and now we've kept it as a garden of remembrance. it was not only for prostitutes, it was for all the outcasts of society. It was a pauper's burial ground, and probably a lot of very, very sad stories. If you are from the UK, you might know the show on the BBC called History Cold Case. I love that show. There's an American version as well, but there was an episode in that show where they exhumed the remains of a little girl that was 12 years old, and they could prove that she died out of syphilis. So, you know, syphilis often takes a few years to kill you. So, I mean, they had some ridiculously young sex workers. And in the 1700s, the body snatchers, we're very close to Guy's Hospital. The body snatchers, they used to come here and steal all those bodies because nobody cared, you know, about those outcasts of society. Nowadays we do. Nowadays it's a little garden of remembrance, and there's a lot of people that come around to pay their respect. They even have a little procession once a year. So finally they're getting some respect back. Anyway, back to Klosowski. So he's back in London. He's no longer with Lucy. He met another girl called Annie Chapman. Now that name might ring a bell. It's not the Annie Chapman. The Annie Chapman, the Jack the Ripper victim, she's already dead 5 years earlier. Some say that it might be her daughter. No. She did have a daughter called Annie, but no, it's a different lady. That was quite a common name. And Annie got pregnant, and he said, bye, not mine. You know, at the time, if you were not married, you had absolutely no responsibility towards the child. He clearly doesn't like children, Klosowski. So he, actually the last time she sees him, he's on a bicycle and he's like, bye, I'm moving to a different borough. But before to go, he took something from her, with him, her name. From that very day, he rebranded himself as George Chapman, and he never ever answered the name Klosowski ever again. So he became George Chapman. He moved to Leytonstone in some kind of a flat share, and he started a relationship with another lady that lived with him, Mary Spink. Mary Spink, she had a problem with alcohol. She had a son already. Her husband had deserted her, and she had a little son. And one day they're kissing in the staircase when the landlord is like, you two not married. So they were like, oh, don't worry, we're getting married. And on a Sunday, they left wearing their lovely suits and everything. They went to church, or at least that's what they say, and they came back and they're like, yeah, we're married now. Not true. He cannot be married again because he's still married to Lucy, remember? So they faked their marriage, and then they moved to Hastings. Hastings, it's in Sussex, south, on the seaside, where he bought a little shop. It's still there today, and he opened a barber shop where Mary plays the piano. So they're doing musical shaves. It is fairly popular in Hastings, and he makes a bit more money. With that money, he buys a boat. He calls it the Mosquito. But he was not a great sailor, and he actually he managed to sink the boat with himself, Mary, and the little Willie, the son. Luckily, none of them died. Well, some criminologists now believe that it might actually have been his first attempt to kill his wife, but that did not work. And after the incident, they decided to leave Hastings to come back to London. But before to leave town, he went to see a customer of his, a pharmacist, and he bought 1 ounce of antimony, tartar emetic. This is a poison. 1 ounce, to give you an idea, it's enough to kill 40 people. At the time, the Victorian pharmacy was full of poison. It was very easy to get poison. By the way, straight ahead in the middle of the street there, we're not gonna go all the way because it's a new build and there's not much to see today, but in the late Victorian era, that was the site of a pub called the Monument. The Monument. Remember that pub because we'll talk about the Monument in a few minutes. So he gets his tartar emetic, and he actually kept the label On the little bottle or container, there was a label, and he kept it. So that was later used as evidence. Antimony poisoning, we might have spoken about that in some of my tours. If you followed my tour in West Norwood Cemetery, the Bravo case, it's the same poison. So it is a powder that dissolves. It's white or maybe a little beige. Imagine maybe like MDMA. If you've ever seen any MDMA, I don't know, why did I compare? Anyway, and it dissolves into water. It has a taste. So if you were to mix it into water, you might taste it. So if you dissolve it into, let's say, but he used to dissolve it in brandy or champagne, then you wouldn't really taste it. And it is very toxic, but it was used in the Victorian pharmacy. It was used mainly for livestock, or in very, very small quantities. It was also used to induce vomiting. So, for example, if you wanted to stop your partner from alcohol, you could put tiny, tiny, tiny quantities in their drink to put them off alcohol, because they'll feel sick and they'll put them off the drinks. So that's why they sold it in pharmacy. And they move back to London, and Mary starts to feel a bit sick. She starts vomiting and diarrhea. She sees a few doctors, and she had a few wrong diagnoses. She was even at some point diagnosed with tuberculosis. George is ever so sorry. He doesn't know what to do. He's very sad, and one day, Christmas Day, she dies. Well, George is very sad, but he does open the pub an hour later, because they bought a pub. And they buried her. No one thought much of that death. A few weeks later, he puts an ad in the paper to hire a new barmaid, because he needed assistance. And there's another lady that applied. Her name was Bessie Taylor. She got the job, and very quickly they got engaged. Well, engaged. Bessie, we do not know if she actually believed that she was married. They left. They went to get married. Bessie's family actually gave a bit of money towards the marriage. We don't know if she pretended as well, or if she believed she was marrying him. And they actually moved to Hertfordshire, to Bishop Stamford, where they bought a pub as well. Bessie is very popular. With Mary, we can kind of find him a motive. Mary, she did have a bit of money, about £57,000 in today's money, and George ended up with all that. With Bessie, really, we don't know. He was being very violent with her. There were a few witnesses in Hertfordshire that had discovered that. And she was in pain with her teeth. She had some teeth abscess. And to make her better, he was giving her some brandy. He had a special bottle of brandy that was specially labeled for Bessie. I didn't pay attention to those posters, Angel. I didn't pay attention, sorry. At the time, they didn't find anything suspicious with it. Actually, they thought that was quite cute, so nice of him to have a special bottle of brandy for her. And she's starting to feel very sick. Eventually, they move back to London, where they buy a pub, the Monument behind me. And Bessie is sick again. Let me show you a photo of Bessie. We've got a photograph of them two together. Where are they? Oops. Here they are. The guns in the background are probably a clue. He did have some American guns when he got caught later on, which is interesting because in New Jersey there were actually a few cases of shooting as well. So yeah, Bessie is very unwell. She sees a few doctors. Weirdly, she actually saw some gynecologist because antimony poisoning, it also creates a few vaginal discharge. It's funny because every time I do this tour, I end up talking about gynecologists right in front of the Royal College of an obstetrician and gynecologist. It's a pure coincidence. I did not plan it, but yeah. And so she got a few wrong diagnoses, and eventually she dies. He pretended to be skinned, to have no money, so the family actually paid for the funeral, would you believe? And by the way, the monument, he had tried to burn it. One day he told Bessie to go away, to go and see family, and he set fire to his own pub to claim insurance. But the insurance company refused to pay him because they said, there were a few witnesses that had seen him removing the furniture and removing the valuable before the fire. So not a very good frauder, and he did not get any money from the insurance. Then he bought another pub right here. That's where we're heading to now, and he placed an ad in the paper again to hire a new barmaid. And there's a young girl that applied. Her name was Maud Marsh. She was, I think she was 18 or 19 maybe. So very, very young. At the time, the age of majority really was considered to be 21. When she came for the interview, her mother came with her. And yes, I love the light at this hour as well, Tish. So the mum came with her, and he did the interview. The mother was really concerned. You know, she did her job properly. She asked all the good questions, and she did ask George, "Oh, I understand this is a living position. Is it just gonna be the two of you in the building, or is there anybody else living here?" And George said, "No, don't worry. There's a family lodging upstairs, so it won't be the two of us only." And the mother is satisfied. The thing is, the next day, he actually kicked the family away. So he kicked them out before Maud even moved in. So she moved in, she took the job. It does look, that case is very well documented. It does look like he was trying to groom her, but she was somehow kind of saying no or pushing him away, when eventually he popped the question. He was like, "Do you want to marry me?" And guess what? She said yes. Let's take a look. This is Elizabeth II. So that letterbox is not that old. Elizabeth II Regina. So why did she say yes? We don't know. Did she fancy him all along? Or is it just because she didn't want to miss the opportunity? You know, at the time, the dynamic between men and women really was so different. If you have a gentleman with money and a prospect of a future, you know, we don't know. But she said yes, they married. They married. He cannot get married anyway. He's still married to Lucy. So they went to church. Poor Maud, she probably did believe that she was married. And actually, the parents, then they asked Maud, they were like, "Oh, can we see the wedding certificate, please?" And Maud was like, "Oh, no, don't worry, George has already put it away." So the parents, they do ask all the good questions, but they don't really follow up, you know. So they kind of gave up on that one, and they just took it for granted that they were married. And Maud got pregnant, but George convinced her that she was too young, and he convinced her to perform an illegal abortion on her. That worked. She didn't have the baby. He did it himself. But then after that, that's when she started to feel unwell. So this is the building here, the white building in the middle. That was the Crown pub. If you looked at the top, you might still see a bit of a crown. So that's the illustration of the, let me try to zoom in. So that's the crown up there. The back of the building is new, but the facade is still from those days. And you know, everything is still okay at that point. But Maud is starting to feel unwell, and on top of that, he's hired a new barmaid, Florence, and one day Maud spotted them kissing, and she told him, "That's it, you stop that or I'm gone." That could be his motive with Maud, although that guy is nuts, he probably doesn't need a motive. But yeah, from that day she starts to be very unwell, and we are just a few meters away from Guy's hospital. So he cannot really get away this time with only calling a few doctors, and he has to send her to hospital. She goes to hospital for just over a week, and she starts to be much better. Well, obviously, because she's not slowly poisoned. He was also giving her the famous brandy. And but again, for them at the time, it was just so nice of him to have this brandy and champagne for Maud. But Maud's parents are very, very present, and Maud's mother, actually, she decides to move into the pub when the condition of her daughter doesn't get any better. Eventually, Maud is extremely sick. She cannot eat anymore. She cannot drink. Actually, it gets so bad that she's not able to be fed anymore. She has to be fed anally. Yes, you've heard this right. She has to be fed anally. And weirdly, let me cross because there's no little man here. Weirdly, he actually asked some of his customers if they would be willing to help Maud by feeding her anally. Obviously, the customer said, no, I mean, I'm happy to help, but not that way. We are now in front of St. George the Martyr. That's where Little Dorrit gets married in Little Dorrit, the Dickens. And that's quite ironic because that's St. John's, so John the Saint, right next to the pub with John the sinner, John the murderer. So anyway, Maud is really unwell. They decide to call a second doctor. George was not really up for it, but he had to. And the second doctor, he did kind of mention that it could be some kind of poisoning, but obviously he couldn't say it because you cannot accuse anyone of poisoning, like that. And that's when George started to become a bit cocky. He actually said in front of a customer, she could be gone like that, showing the tip of the finger. And he actually told the doctor that they were not married. And the doctor repeated it to Maud's mum. So that's how Maud's mum actually started to be very suspicious. Not necessarily of him, but of the whole situation. And one night when Maud is very unwell, she decides to try the brandy. She tries it and she's like, "Oh, that's disgusting." And there was a lady that one of the customers that had been hired to take care of Maud. She also tries the brandy and she's like, "Oh." And that's when the mother told the doctor, "If my daughter die, we are not burying her. I want a post-mortem." And the doctor agreed. But the night she tried the brandy, it was too late. Maud was actually dead the next morning. So George was, of course, ever so sad, all crying and everything, but he still opened the pub a couple of hours later. And they took the body to the back there. Behind the pub, there's a little graveyard, and the morgue is there in the graveyard. That's where they did the post-mortem. Apparently, it is said that as they're doing the post-mortem, the doctors hear something behind the door. They open the door and they see a man, the back of a man, running back towards the pub. So they think Chapman was actually listening at the door. They did the autopsy, and weirdly, they actually found a trace of arsenic. They had been told to look for arsenic. They did not suspect antimony. And that's how eventually they could catch him for poisoning, and later on they found the antimony. She had a lot of antimony in her guts because she was very sadly even poisoned anally. That's how he got caught. Well, they got first very suspicious, and they caught him here at the pub. That was the day of the coronation of Edward VII. So he wanted to stay to make the money that day. He should have run away, but he wanted to stay in London to make that money. By the way, I didn't even tell you, but he doesn't have a son anymore. The son that had, well, Mary's son, he actually tried to give it to Bernardo's charity, an orphanage, but they said, no, it's your kid, you keep it. And a year later, he gave it to the workhouse. So the workhouses, they were those horrible accommodations for the very, very poor. And so they arrested him, and they decided to exhume the two other wives. Mary Spink, she had been buried with 14 other caskets on top. Apparently, when they removed the other bodies, they were smelling very bad, as you can imagine. She had been buried for a while. And when they opened Mary's coffin, it wasn't actually too smelly, but we know that antimony poisoning, it actually preserves you. It dehydrates you so much that you actually stay well preserved. And when they opened Bessie's grave, she had a bit of a layer of mold on her skin, but when they removed the mold, she was also very well preserved. So that's how he got caught. He never confessed though, and he never admitted being Klosowski. Although they found all the birth certificates and everything here at the pub, he never ever admitted that it used to be his name. After he was caught, so he was hanged at Wandsworth Prison. That's the prison we visited a few days ago, but my signal was terrible, sadly. He got hanged, and then Inspector Abeline actually sent a letter to the inspector that had caught Chapman, and he said to him, "My friend, you've got Jack the Ripper at last." So the main investigator in the Jack the Ripper story was actually convinced that Klosowski was the Ripper. I'm not trying to convince you. I have my doubts myself, but he did, in terms of places, it's quite spot on. Places and timing. He did live in Whitechapel. He had some basic of anatomy. He fits the descriptions. Well, there were about 13 eyewitnesses in the Jack the Ripper story. I wouldn't trust all of them anyway, because most of those people were drunk in the middle of the night. He might have been a little bit too old at the time of, too young, sorry. At the time of the Ripper murders, he would have been 23. When according to most witnesses, the guy they saw would be between 25 and 33, you know. And also, he would have had a very strong accent at the time, which was not noted in any of the testimony. Who knows? In terms of places, yeah, timing, yeah, but can a very vicious, violent, horrible killer become a slow-pace poisoner? It is possible, and in poisoning is a horrible way to kill people as well. You watch them suffer. He used to even photograph them. He was into photography, which gave him an excuse to have some chemicals as well. Who knows? We probably will never know, but he's a good suspect. We have many good suspects, but he's a good one. Anyway, while we're here, let me show you, oh, where is it? There it is. This wall, it's actually the last remaining wall of the Marshalsea prison. So the Marshalsea, that was a debtor prison until 1869, until the Bankruptcy Act. You could be in prison for debts. So if you had a baker that you did not pay, you'd end up in prison. That's what happened to John Dickens, Charles Dickens' dad. And actually, in there, he met a chap called Fagin that was very nice to him. And how did little Charles thanks Fagin? He named one of his worst villains after him. Little anecdote. There's a little boy that came here to the pub about 2 weeks before Klosowski was caught, or Chapman. He never admitted being Klosowski, ever. Even Lucy, she came to visit him in prison many times. He always refused to recognize her. He said he did not know her. But anyway, there was a little boy that came here. In his biography, the little boy says that he came to the pub to ask for a glass of water. And there was a man with a mustache that gave him a glass of water. The water tasted disgusting. So he popped the glass back on the counter as the mustache man looked away, and he ran away. That little boy, you might have heard of him. His name is George Chapman. Is it true? You know, a lot of people kind of spice up their biographies, and sometimes memory kind of get confused. We've seen that a lot with Prince Harry. So yeah, I wouldn't, you know, trust everything in every biography, but you know, why not? And why would Chapman poison little Charlie? We don't know. But he did hate children, so anything is possible with a crazy man like this. Do you guys have any questions for me? This is gonna be the end of the tour. Fagin was a friend of Dickens. Oh, do you mean they didn't meet here, Kurt? I read that they met here. That could be wrong. Yes. Well, we don't know if that's true. Yeah. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming tonight, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, there might be a flock of Fagins. The Chapman incident planted the initial seed for the film. Oh, okay. Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Tish. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Gwen. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. If any of you left me a little tip, thank you, Tazian. That's very much appreciated. I don't see them live on here. Eventually, it's going to be possible to tip me through YouTube, but it's going to take a bit of a while because they have a new scheme where I could, if my YouTube channel was English, I could actually get tips through YouTube already, but sadly I created it in France and that doesn't count, so I'm gonna have to wait to have 4,000 hours of watch time. So yeah, eventually you'll be able to tip me through YouTube as well, but at the moment it's only the Buy Me a Coffee link and the PayPal me link. Cool. Thank you, Janie. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Roberta. I'll just give it a minute, see if I see any questions. If not, thank you very much for coming today. Keep YouTubing. Next week, I'll do a tour from Greece. It's not scheduled yet, but I'm going to Lefkada, so I'll do a tour from there. And keep an eye on my channel because probably tomorrow or the day after I'll publish a little video about Lithuania, Vilnius. Are you sorry I have to wait? It's fine, it's okay. It's just a new scheme. And I was like, yes, because that was gonna be, it's not to be completely monetized anyway. It's only to get tips from the audience. So I wouldn't be able to get any money out of the ad for another few weeks anyway. So I'm not missing much. But yeah, I was like, yes. And then I realized, now it's updated for my colleagues in the UK today and not me. So I realized it's because I had created that channel in France about 17 years ago now, and France is not part of the trial. Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Rose. Cool, I don't see any more questions, so I'm gonna get going. Have a good evening, a good morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.